Senate Committee on Agriculture, Food Production, and Outdoor Resources will come to order. We're going to start as a subcommittee today because we do not have enough for a quorum. Appreciate everybody who's traveled here across the state and wherever to be here participating in today's hearing. For those here to testify on legislation, please speak into the microphone, introduce yourself, and address the comments to the committee members. Please keep your comments relevant to the legislation. Once your testimony concludes, the committee members will have an opportunity to ask questions. Please complete a witness appearance form on the table or online and leave it on the table for our committee minutes. Please silence your cell phone if you haven't already. And actually, I think we do have a quorum here, so Kyle, please call the roll.
Senators Bean.
Here.
Black. Here. Bernstetter. Brown. Carter. Crawford.
Here.
McCreary.
Here.
Razor. Washington. We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Like I said, we're going to hear two bills today. We're going to hear Senate Bill 981 by Senator Black, Senate Bill 1460 by Senator Brown. Senator Brown is not able to be here today, so I will be presenting that bill for him. So with that, Senator Black, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Rusty Black, and I represent the 12th Senate District. I filed Senate Bill 981 in an attempt to add clarity of what is and what is not in the definitions of waters of the state. Currently, it only refers to rivers, streams, lakes, and other bodies of surface and subsurface water located within the state that are not entirely located on one person's property. Senate Bill 981 was drafted to give more clarity to the Missouri waters of the state definition. I have heard concerns about the bill's proposed language regarding aquifers and how the bill could cause state aquifers to lose pollution protections, and I am actively working with people to address these concerns. I've met with the Missouri Department of Natural Resources as well as local governments to explore solutions that would ensure that these subsurface aquifers do not lose pollution protections. And with that, as you well know, Chairman, I go off script once in a while. This is not something about DNR's, some kind of attack on DNR or attack on anything else. Because of a couple court cases at the federal level, we do believe now that the state of Missouri is going to control this, and I think it's important as a person that owns property in different places. You know, I have wells, I have streams, one's got rock bottom going through it, one's good old Missouri mud bottom, you know, where we live at. And what part of my property is it okay for the state to make a decision on? And at the same time, as I'm doing this, I don't have some underlying thing where I'm going to go the second this pass and start dumping toxic waste on my farm at Caldwell County or something like that. So I think it's important for us to discuss this and try to come up with language that we think is appropriate as legislators, as policymakers, to protect our waters, at the same time protect our rights as landowners. So thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for Senator Black? Senator Crawford.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this an attempt to clarify the federal waters of the U.S. or to protect us from some of the things that might come down from that?
Well, the purpose of this is after the second case, and there's a second case that also deals with waters too, and we got experts behind us that are going to talk about positive and negatively, I'm sure, about those cases. But after the second case, it re-emphasizes or put the goal of protecting waters back on the state and pull back on what federal can do inside of our state. Now, that federal still has jurisdiction all over the place within waters as well. But there's also going to be a subset that's going to be up to our Department of Natural Resources to help protect us. You know, and I have wells at home. I don't necessarily want those to get bad, but at the same time, going past my homes, past farms, my family farms, when you drive by, what out there on those properties are really should be state waters, not Senator Black's farm waters. Does that make sense?
Not a puddle that's on your farm or something like that, maybe.
Well, and I live in a place where I have a large, what people where I come from call ditch, right? And that ditch today has water really running through that ditch now, and I've got a neighbor that built a pond on that ditch. That is true today, and then if it stays this dry much longer, instead of it having water run in it till normally sometime in mid-May is when the water stops running in that, it may stop running by the end of March if things don't go. So we do have to look at that, and what responsibility do I have with that, as we call them, ditch there that's dry part of the time and wet part of the time?
And I guess different states have different types of soil and things like that too, so it's probably pretty important for us to have our own plan.
That's what I believe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions? Senator McCreary?
Good morning. So what you talked in your opening about adding clarity, and when I'm looking at your legislation, to me it actually adds more confusion than clarity. And part of that is, you know, you don't have to be a geologist or, you know, a hydrologist to understand that water, what you do on your property in your lakes and ponds, for example, ultimately impact other people because of the way water flows. So, you know, water is going to end up, you know, if you are polluting on your property, it's ultimately going to impact other people that are dependent on that water for livestock water, but also for drinking water. So, you know, I'm not seeing where there's necessarily clear language concerning lakes and ponds, for example. So I feel like this bill is excluding a lot of groundwater from protections, and we've had protections on that for over 50 years. So the way this bill is written, I feel like it's undoing some of the clarity that we had over the last 50 years and doesn't necessarily provide clarity for property owners as it relates to lakes or ponds. So I just wanted to hear your response to that.
What I'm responding, like the ponds that I have on my property, are you saying that they should be regulated by DNR?
Yes.
And I bet you
Yeah,
see, I don't.
The water in your pond doesn't just stay in your pond. Ultimately, water gets absorbed into the water table, and it eventually will find its way to a stream or a creek or some other form of water, eventually. Now, I heard my colleague talk about a puddle. I'm not talking about a puddle. I'm talking about like a lake or a pond.
Yeah, that is something that we disagree on. When I built the ponds that are on our property and other farms around there, you know, our goal was to seal them so water doesn't leach out. I understand that some of it does. Slowly it leaches out. But if it leaches through those very quick, then the pond doesn't hold water and we have no access to what we built the pond for. Yeah, I hope that makes some sense. So I don't believe that the pond on my property that I put there for a water structure, whether it was for livestock, for erosion control, whatever the reason was that pond was put there, part of them put there with the help of SCS, Soil Conservation Service, NRCS, with funding there. Once they approve, the government approve how that pond was built, and they do show up while they're being built as well, and then whatever structure I'm required, because I have livestock also, which are, you know, would be a polluter, right? If a cow poops somewhere and it rains, part of that waste will certainly end up in a pond, just like you said. And the pond in my point of view, is part of the filtering system to help keep that from moving on down the stream on a neighbor, et cetera, as well. So I believe there's clarity in saying the state does not have the right to come and test that pond, check my pond, unless I ask them to. And plenty of people do that as well, unless that pond is what? On two different landowners put together, and I have neighbors that have those shared ponds, and then there'll be an expert come up behind me that has shown me a map. I don't think everybody's going to be able to have time to look at it, et cetera, of what streams have water in them all the time, and those do come up on some of our farms. The farm in Hamilton, that farm, thank goodness, is never dry. So does that stream get regulated by the state? And I don't believe it's going to take it out of regulation, even if my bill passed, Senator. It still will be, because it has what in it all the time? Water. It has continuous water in it all the time. Even in the driest of years, there are two springs on this farm that feed that, and that stream ultimately will be, whether I like it or not, it will be a water of the state, continue to be a water of the state if this bill passes and become law.
So we've had portions of the state with extreme drought where things that, traditionally had water flowing in them, sometimes high volumes, sometimes low volumes, were totally dry. So my interpretation of this language is that would be a loophole as well. So an area that doesn't have water continuously flowing in it. So we've all been, to places in the state of Missouri in the last couple of years where creeks, rivers were dry because of extreme drought.
Yeah, I disagree that this piece of legislation will take a normal body of water, creek that normally has water in it, and because we have two droughts in a row, make that stream that I'm talking about in the Caldwell County farm all of a sudden not be. And I understand you're saying that this creates a loophole where Rusty Black could argue that. Senator Black could argue the fact that that creek is dry today. It's not been dry the last 100 years, and whenever it rains again next fall or whatever, it'll have running water in it. I don't think that stream all of a sudden becomes not a water of the state, because the normal permanency of that stream is what? Water runs through it.
Well, we might have to work on that language, because the word continuous means continuous to me. And maybe there's some fancy, maybe it means something else in this building. I guess, so you talked about a couple of court decisions. My interpretation of the Sackett decision doesn't require Missouri to remove protections for groundwater. So is there another court case that you're referring to that would require Missouri to remove protections for groundwater?
I don't know. When you say require, like the Supreme Court told Missouri that we're going to remove that, I don't.
No. So in the Sackett decision came out. And now I feel like this bill is in a response to that.
It is.
The Sackett decision didn't come out and say that states need to remove protections for subsurface water or groundwater. So I'm trying to figure out why. I feel like the Sackett decision came out, and now this is an overreaction to that. So I'm wondering if there's another court case that I'm not aware of that you're responding to.
I think we're going to learn about another court case as well as we go through here. And the fact that I also, in my introduction, said water supply district's been in. I live on top of an aquifer where I'm at. My water in the water system, not in my home, not what my livestock drink. It is well water. But water I receive at my home is out of that aquifer that's supplied in a pump at Lock Spring.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Senator Black? Seeing none, Senator Black, just one quick comment. I'm glad to hear you use the word ditches, because obviously you've been to Southeast Missouri, because that's all we use. So I'm glad to hear that, Senator. Who all is here to testify in favor of this bill? Can I see a show of hands? Who are those who will be opposed? Just ask you to please be respectful of the time here in the committee. Please don't be redundant with your testimony. So with that, we're going to do all in favor of first, followed by those against second. So All those in favor, please come up to testify.
Followed waters of the United States and waters of the state for that entire time. And I think it would be helpful to for the committee to understand where we came from, what the federal law requires, what the state law options are, and things like that. But I just want to point out that the Federal Clean Water Act regulates the discharges of point sources to waters of the United States. And the definition of waters of the United States has been developed through case law through the years. There's two main cases that Senate Bill 981 basically incorporates. One is the Sackett case that was mentioned earlier. The other is the Maui case. Senator McCreary was asking about groundwater. Under the federal law, under the federal definition of waters of the United States, it does not include groundwater, basically, unless under the Maui case, that groundwater comes back to the surface. So Missouri is not required to regulate groundwater if they don't want to. Now here's how the permitting program works under the Clean Water Act. Each state can pass its own laws to regulate the discharge of point sources, and EPA can delegate their permitting program to the states. But they will not delegate that unless the state has a definition that is at least as stringent as the federal. But it can be more stringent in any respect that the state wishes. So when Senator McCreary was asking about the word required, we're not required to regulate groundwater. We're not required to be more stringent than federal, but we can. So that's what the law is. So we have a delegated program here in the state, and many, many years ago, even before my memory, we had a definition of waters of the state, and I think it changed maybe one time in the last 25 years or so ago, but the definition of waters of the state is extremely vague. It says, in part, all rivers, streams, lakes, and other bodies of surface and subsurface water. So it does not say what kind of stream has to be considered waters of the state. Is it a permanent stream? Is it a semi-permanent stream? Is it an ephemeral stream? Is it a dry ditch? It doesn't say. And in Missouri, we do not have a regulation that defines this statutory definition of waters of the state. So we have something that is pretty vague right now, and Senate Bill 981 tries to use the federal case law to add some clarity to what waters of the state are. So a little bit more history on waters of the state. Since we have to be at least as stringent as the federal law, for many, many years, the federal definition of waters of the United States was extremely broad. It followed the 2006 Rapanos case that says any water body with a, quote, significant nexus to something further downstream is waters of the United States. And that was the law since 2006 until last May when the Sackett decision came down. So that was an extremely broad definition of waters of the United States. And Missouri basically followed that because we have a vague statute, and we had to because we had to be at least as stringent as EPA. So that's what we did. But now that the Rapanos case came down, the Sackett case came down in May of last year, the Supreme Court told EPA that you've been misinterpreting waters of the United States for a long time. And now we know two things. I guess I'll just say, well, there's two things. One is that under waters of the United States, you have to only regulate relatively permanent streams. So it's relatively permanent. Those are the words in the Sackett decision. The other part was about is when are wetlands regulated, and there must be a continuous connection to a relatively permanent stream. So those are the two things that came out of the Sackett case. But if we look back in time, how did Missouri get to the point where we are in what we regulate? Any water in the United States has to support fishable and swimmable uses. And in the year 2010, the Missouri Coalition for the Environment filed a lawsuit against EPA saying, hey, Missouri is not protecting fishable, swimmable uses on all waters of the United States that are in Missouri. And the EPA settled that case on a motion for summary judgment. So the state was required by EPA to further define and assign more uses. Yes, sir.
If we could just wrap it up in about 1 minute to allow questions, I would appreciate it.
Okay. So anyway, after that case, there was a rulemaking. The rulemaking adopted in the Clean Water Commission regulations adopted a mapping system. It's basically a water database, so you can go on and see what waters of the state are, and it is extremely broad. And it incorporates a lot of upland waters that are on the farms and ranches of the members of the Missouri Cattlemen's and the Missouri Pork Association. And we believe that this legislation would be very helpful. I had prepared some handouts, and I don't know if you have time to go through them, Mr. Chairman, but I'll go through them pretty quickly. On the very first page, and I did number these after the first page, it shows a map of the dark blue lines that used to be waters of the state, and then all of the background blue lines. And if you flip the page, it shows the more detail that came about in 2014 in our own regulations that added 5 times more waters to the definition of waters of the state of Missouri. If you turn to the third slide, you see a grass waterway. This happens to be across the street from my farm in Macon County, Missouri. This is considered waters of the state and is required currently to support fishable and swimmable uses. If you flip to the next page, page 4, it shows a topo map. I randomly zoomed in on a former past president of the Missouri Cattlemen's Association to see what the waters were on in and around their farm. I circled 3 places on that map, which was the very upper end of those watershed. If you turn to page 5, that water course, which is a grass waterway, ends in a farm pond. If you flip the page to the last slide, it shows that right near the top of the hill, the current definition of waters of the state through this water database ends in another farm pond and basically just at the top of the hill. So my point being, and I want to be fair to the Department of Natural Resources, I do not see the Department of Natural Resources going out and regulating farm ponds or issuing violations. I don't see that. That's not my point here today. My point being is that we have a current definition of waters of the state in regulation that will not be changed unless this bill passes, that regulates basically grass waterways and other upland watercourses that I would rather call a ditch than a stream. With that, I do want to say that, kind of in closing, we have been in collaboration with other partners, including some municipal friends of ours and colleagues, and we've discussed with Senator Black and others about whether this bill should or should not, and to what extent it should regulate groundwater. And we are amenable to maybe a substitute bill that would change the current groundwater to something I think that Senator Black talked about earlier, but we would be amenable to what has been recommended through some other folks that are colleagues of mine to regulate subsurface aquifers used as public or private water supplies. So Senator McCreary, I hope that answers or helps you in some regard, but I better conclude my testimony, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Senator McCreary?
Okay, so on page 6 of your handout, I see 6 large barns that I'm assuming have animals in them. You said it was a cattleman's property, so where does all the waste end up from those barns? Does it end up in the pond to the left or to the right?
I don't know whose farm that is because it's not a cattleman's farm.
Okay.
I don't think, but
Chickens?
it's probably it could be chicken.
Okay, so where does the waste from this, looks like a large chicken operation, where does that end up? It's going to end up in one of those ponds to the left or the right, no?
No, absolutely not. That would be illegal. The waste from a poultry farm is collected and it is land applied on farmers' fields. So it would be illegal for that to discharge into that pond, ma'am.
All right.
And one last thing I want to say is that if people are worried that this would restrict the definition of waters of the state, you cannot, on a non-regulated ditch, dump a whole bunch of water in that, and it flows down, and as soon as it hits what is now, maybe if this bill passed, a relatively permanent stream and polluted that stream, that would be illegal. And if you were a point source, you would need to have a permit from the Department of Natural Resources. So don't think that this bill would open the floodgates, if no pun intended, for any pollution of our relatively permanent streams here in the state of Missouri.
So one of the things I'm struggling with, and the chair had a bill like a month or two ago where we're trying, Missouri's a state that's rich in water resources, so we're trying to, in Senate Bill 782, we're trying to put parameters in place for how we can or will not sell our water to people outside of the state of Missouri moving forward. So, and in that bill, the chair talks about water resources being all waters of the state occurring on the surface in natural or artificial channels, lakes, reservoirs, or impoundments, and in subsurface aquifers, which are available or which may be made available. So we've got a bill like that where we, as a groups, are acknowledging that all the water, like water is water, it's going to all end up, mixing in together eventually, and we're trying to put parameters in place. But then now we've got this bill where we're trying to say that's not true. So I think as a policymaker, what I'm struggling to understand is how we can have it both ways. I don't see how we can have it both ways.
Well, those bills have two completely different purposes. This bill would affect the Missouri Clean Water Law and permitting and how water quality standards.
Right. But we seem to think that people want to
Exporting
buy
water
our
is
water.
a completely different thing. So you could have two completely different definitions if you wanted to.
Well, I don't see it that way, so
Very good.
thanks.
Any further questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thanks.
Next person up in favor of Senate Bill 981.
Good morning, Mike Deering, representing the Missouri Cattlemen's Association. This is a priority bill for us, providing regulatory certainty for our members and for landowners, and simply just responding to the SACA decision and making sure that our definitions are clear and easy to understand for everybody.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up in favor of Senate Bill 981.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Dan Engelman, represent Missouri Farm Bureau. First off, I appreciate the senator bringing this bill forward. I think he did a nice job in presenting this, spot on in his presentation, the need for this legislation. As I'm sure a lot of you know, this has been a signature issue for Missouri Farm Bureau for a long, long time. And so realize, that the language probably needs some work, and the senator addressed that in his presentation. So anyway, I think too many times, I think the intent here is obviously very good in terms of tightening this definition. I think too many times in my experience at Missouri Farm Bureau and also as a congressional staffer, it seems to me like, it's your property, but it's really not, according to the agencies. And I'm not saying necessarily DNR per se, but especially at the federal level. So again, mirroring the Sackett decision language, largely what we're doing here. But again, appreciate the senator bringing this forward. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up in favor of Senate Bill 981.
watch that. Chairman, members of the committee, Casey Wasser, representing the Missouri Soybean Association Day. We'd like to go on record support for the previously stated reasons. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, in favor of Senate Bill 981, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ray McCarty, Associated Industries of Missouri, also want to go on record in support of codifying the Sackett decision.
Thank you for your testimony. Anybody here? Questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of Senate Bill 981, please come forward. Seeing none, next up will be not in favor. Please come forward.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Zach Morris. I am here on behalf of the Conservation Federation of Missouri. We are a federation made up of over 100 affiliate organizations who represent more than 80,000 Missourians that are invested in conservation and the outdoors. We just wrapped up our annual convention last weekend where our members voted to adopt a resolution that supports science-based regulation of Missouri's waters and opposes any changes to definitions of waters of the state of Missouri. I also work for a small Missouri-based environmental services company where we operate in the Clean Water Act mitigation space, so I feel like I know this issue fairly well. I understand and have heard multiple times this morning that this bill attempts to conform Missouri's definition of waters of the state with the federal definition of waters of the United States. And I feel the need to point out that those two definitions operate differently when it comes to regulating waters. Section 404 of the Clean Water Act depends on federal definition of waters of the U.S., which governs things like dredge and fill, and that's the space that I operate in mitigation. Definition of waters of the state of Missouri determines which waters are subject to regulations governing discharge of pollution. So in essence, removing waters from this definition legalizes the pollution of those waters. I think many Missourians are concerned about the groundwater issue in particular, as that's been addressed. You know, millions of Missourians get their drinking water from groundwater sources, aquifers, wells, and those are also used to irrigate crops and water livestock. But even those of us that don't depend on groundwater for drinking water, we still live downstream from someone else. And even in waters that don't fit the definition of relatively permanent, pollution still flows downstream and will end up in somebody's drinking water eventually. We've also heard a lot about certainty, which puzzles me a little bit. If I asked everybody in this room to define relatively permanent, I'd get 50 different answers. That is a definition that has not been defined definitively at the federal level and would create a lengthy period of uncertainty for regulated entities like rural sewer districts and others that have to acquire permits to discharge their pollutants. In the meantime, thousands of miles of streams would be subject to case-by-case determinations from the Department of Natural Resources, which would create additional regulatory delays for those seeking permits and create a significant cost for the Department of Natural Resources while they sought to not only make a new rule to define relatively permanent, but also help out permittees that are trying to navigate that framework. As it stands currently, we have a system that works pretty well. Groundwater protections are essential to the health of millions of Missourians and our agricultural communities. Regulating pollution discharge into upstream waters protects fish and wildlife that support healthy and safe recreation opportunities that are economic drivers in many rural parts of Missouri. Rural water treatment plants and other permittees have regulatory certainty because the definition we've had has been in place for decades and is understood and accepted, and they can carry on their business like they always have. Changing the definition of waters of the state of Missouri draws a false equivalency between federal regulations and state regulations and undermines all the benefits that we currently have in place by having a more strict definition than the federal definition. For those reasons, and on behalf of our members of the Conservation Federation of Missouri, I'd ask you to oppose this bill, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness? Senator McCreary.
So you probably can anticipate that my main concern is about how ultimately all this interacts with people's ability to have access to clean drinking water.
Sure.
So I'm trying to sort through all of this. You know, I heard all the corporate ag people testify in support, but I'm hearing from people, that are very concerned about the way this bill is written and its impact ultimately on their source of clean drinking water. So, I mean, do we have any? The way I read this is that there's only going to be a few larger like streams and rivers that are going to be regulated now, which leaves a lot of other smaller sources unregulated, and ultimately, in my opinion, could impact people's ability to have access to drinking water. So can you walk through how would we decide, how does the state decide then what rivers and streams are going to be protected from pollution versus what's going to be left unchecked?
Sure. So this bill attempts to apply the relatively permanent standard and then the continuous surface connection standards that were set up in the Sackett decision. Those, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many in the scientific community, are not good science and not good policy. And so I really can't answer your question to the fullest extent because I don't know what relatively permanent means. I do know what a continuous surface connection means, and I share your concerns earlier about some of our ephemeral streams that have a surface connection sometimes,
right,
or wetlands that perhaps are separated by a levee or a berm but have an important ecological and subsurface connection to streams. I mean, the Mississippi and Missouri rivers are drinking water sources for millions of people, and they have many, many wetlands along their banks that are permanently separated by man-made structures, but still have a subsurface connection.
Right.
And polluting those waters could certainly add pollution into that drinking water source.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
testimony. Next up, not in favor of Senate Bill 981.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, my name is Steve Jeffrey. I'm an environmental attorney with Jeffrey Law Group in St. Louis. Also, I have more environmental law experience than my colleague, Mr. Brundage, just to clarify. I'm here today representing...
Relevant to the bill, sir. Relevant to the bill.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm here today to offer testimony on behalf of 8 of our clients in opposition to this bill. The recent Sackett opinion from the Supreme Court addresses the scope of the federal jurisdiction under the definition of waters of the United States in the Federal Clean Water Act. But as been pointed out, that opinion does not address groundwater or surface or subsurface water in any way. Under the Federal Clean Water Act, the states have responsibility for subsurface waters. In this regard, in 1972, over 50 years ago, the Missouri legislature decided that all subsurface water in Missouri deserve protection as, quote, waters of the state, unquote. It's well documented that Missouri has more than a dozen major aquifers underlying various regions in the state. In some areas, 3 or more aquifers happen to be present. Also, more than 80% of Missouri's public water supplies use groundwater. It supplies nearly all of the rural residents who use individual private water supplies. Further, Missouri has millions of acres of karst topography that's riddled with springs, caves, sinkholes, and losing streams. When these facts are all considered, there are 3 main reasons why this bill should be rejected, and all subsurface waters in the state should continue to be protected as waters of the state. First, the bill tries to bootstrap the Sackett definition of wetlands to subsurface water, which, if you really look at it in the broadest context, is comparing apples to oranges. They're just different things. Second, the proposed change fails to take into account all of the multitude of differences across Missouri in terms of aquifers, different geology, different groundwater quality, karst features, and the many different sources of groundwater recharge. Finally, there have been expressed so far today no significant compelling reasons to change the existing law. If you look at it, because the Missouri Clean Water Law's definition was first enacted in 1972, regulatory certainty has been on the books for over 50 years. There's been no testimony at all today of any government overreach or government intrusion coming onto someone's property to do something that is unlawful. I happen to come from Phelps County, and there's a saying that people say down there, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Finally, as President Reagan said during his State of the Union address all the way back in 1984, quote, preservation of our environment is not a liberal or a conservative challenge. It's common sense. All Missourians deserve to have their groundwater and subsurface water protected. Please use your common sense and vote no on this bill. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness? Senator McCreary.
Could you, about drinking water, groundwater access, could you repeat your statistic about the percent of Missourians that are using well water and are dependent on groundwater ultimately for their drinking water?
Sure, and this information was pulled from DNR's website.
Okay.
More than 80% of Missouri's public water supplies use groundwater. It supplies nearly all of the rural residents who use individual private wells.
Okay. I was thinking it was about half, so I appreciate the statistic on that. The thing I'm most concerned about is ultimately how we're going to impact drinking water. And I can't imagine anybody here wants more than 80% of Missourians' water to have pollution in it. Now, if it ultimately is going to a treatment plant and that kind of thing, that's different. But I do think there are a lot of folks that are dependent on well water still in the state. So, thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions for the witness? Seeing none, thanks for testimony. Next up, not in favor of Senate Bill 981.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is John Madras, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Missouri chapter pardon me, of the Sierra Club. And I will not reiterate what you've heard already. I would mention the gaping hole that we see here, and that is there's no problem that we're solving here. We have a definition that has worked well for 50 years and can continue to do so. Farm ponds are specifically excluded from the present language. I'm sorry, but that's the way the law was originally crafted, and your farm pond is not regulated, and no one else's farm pond is regulated either. There are a few important aspects, and you've heard a lot of them already. The main concern with groundwater is that those groundwaters, for the most part, do not discharge in a known way to surface water and therefore are not part of this definition any longer. They're not protected as waters of the state of Missouri. We do have some documentation from different sampling expeditions that show private wells in the vicinity of industrial facilities that have elevated levels of nitrate. That is particularly dangerous for small children. Right now, that groundwater is protected as waters of the state. The state can take action if needed to address that concern. If this were to become the state statute in that regard, they would be left to deal with a multinational corporation as a private individual asserting a trespass or a nuisance claim as an individual with no state assistance on that. That's not the way that we work. In Missouri, water is a most important resource that we claim, and we do have part of the state water law that says the department shall ensure that the quality and quantity of the water resources of the state are maintained at the highest level practicable to support present and future beneficial uses. It goes on from there. All of the waters that we see that are in tributaries, in lakes, filter through this system to support what we do as a state of Missouri, to support our people, to support our industries, our businesses. We do not want to jeopardize those. This definition is fairly broad, and it's broad on purpose so that we can actually do that. There was a bill to export Missouri, to prohibit the export of Missouri waters to other states. We supported that. Let's keep our water here. Let's protect our water so that we can use it the way that we need to. I'm particularly concerned about the statement of surface connection because we have some very large lakes that do not have surface connections to the rivers below them. If one goes to Table Rock, Lake of the Ozarks, Are those waters of the state? I would like to think so, but they do not have surface water connections to the water below them. Lake of the Ozarks is entirely privately owned. It may meet the definition of a farm pond under this definition. Is that what our intention is? I don't think so. I hope not. But to the extent that there are fine-tuned actions that we may want to take, those are worthy of discussion, but this puts a lot of water resource at jeopardy. And no, I can't say any more.
Thank you for your testimony.
Do you have any
for the
questions?
witness? Thank you for your testimony. We've got multiple chairs up here, so if you all want to come and sit down and somebody else sit down, that way we can speed things up. But once again, next up, not in favor of Senate Bill 981.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Mary Culler, and I serve as the director of the Missouri Stream Team Watershed Coalition. We are a statewide not-for-profit organization formed in 1999. We're made up of individuals and healthy river organizations from around the state. We work daily to improve the water quality of our river, streams, and lakes of our great state. And we do this through education efforts and encouraging every person in this state to take positive actions to be stewards of their local waterways. I've previously written letters to this committee. I hand-delivered letters to your office on February 6th, and I followed up with those letters by email on February 16th, explaining why we oppose this bill and also the similar bill in the House, because these bills are damaging to Missouri's water resources and to the Missouri public in general. The first letter explained why it was damaging to our streams and our wetlands and our water resources and to drinking water, and damaging to anybody that wants clean water in the state, which I think is everyone. The second letter I wrote explained why this is really not relevant to agricultural operations, but it's very relevant to all the other industries that are polluting in the state or that are permitted to pollute in the state. So my knowledge of this topic comes from my past 20 years of working in water resources in the Midwest. I first worked in Kansas and then Iowa. For the last 18 years, I've worked in the state of Missouri. When I worked in those neighboring states of Kansas and Iowa, I quickly wanted to return here to Missouri, to my home state, for one important reason. Our water resources, our creeks, our rivers, our lakes are by far superior in this state to all of those neighboring states. The abundance of water in this state is an absolute blessing. That is an envy to our neighboring states, and we should not take that blessing for granted. Okay, Senate Bill 981 seeks to redefine waters of the state that we talked about, but it's in a destructive way to water quality and all the ways that people depend on water for those beneficial uses. And so I'm attaching my letters that I've already provided to you. I could speak for at least a minute for each of the years that I've worked on water resources in the state, but I'm not going to take up that much time. But first, just to address some of the things that I've heard today, the current definition of waters of the state is straightforward. Okay, I worked for state agencies for 11 years. Like I said, I've worked for 20 years. It is very straightforward. So to say that this is to create clarity, it does not create clarity. It creates massive confusion. To say that the current definition is vague, it is not vague at all. The current definition basically says if a water extends onto the neighboring property, it's a waters of the state. That was developed to protect downstream landowners from pollution. Okay, one of the joys of my job is meeting people through this. I'm friends with a 90-plus-year-old retired state geologist that actually lives on a farm in northeast Missouri. And he's told me stories about the Water Pollution Control Board. This is a Clean Water Act, so over 50 years ago, and how the state was getting complaints from people where sewage was running onto their property from their upstream neighbor. So the waters of the state definition is built around this. If my upstream neighbor does something to flow onto my property, I am protected by this definition. Okay, so the proposed definition, though, creates great uncertainty because it would require a hydrologic evaluation to be done to determine if a stream or groundwater is subject to regulation. Okay, so this, as a state employee, and I worked for the state for over 10 years, it was clear. When we put this proposed definition in, I see the state agencies being, we don't know what we can regulate. And because it's based on the permanence of water, we're going to have a hydrologic study done. Okay, how much time and state funds is that going to cost to do that for every stream in the state? Okay, the proposed definition legalizes pollution of intermittent streams, and those are the streams that do not flow year-round. Okay, so Missouri, again, we are blessed with water resources. We have many of these intermittent streams, especially in the Ozarks and also in your area. I got to visit down around Perryville a couple weekends ago. A beautiful part of the state, great water resources. Our intermittent streams are full of life. Okay, I worked as a biologist. We have many species in the state that are called endemic, found only in Missouri, nowhere else in the world. Okay, also in the Missouri Ozarks, Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks. A lot of these species found nowhere else in the world. Okay, these streams that we've been calling ditches in other parts of the state may have had life at one time. A lot of the streams in northwest Missouri have been already nuked, so to speak. Okay, I live in northeast Missouri. Our small streams, some of them still have life, but they've already been very damaged. Okay, but we still have very, very high quality streams. So when we talk about needing clarifying language for the aquifers, a big part of this bill that still is not going to be fixed if you start to fix the aquifer or subsurface water is the part on intermittent streams. Okay, intermittent streams flow downstream to surface water supply. We live in northeast Missouri. We drink water out of Mark Twain Lake. That lake serves 14 counties, 60,000 people. We know we have atrazine in our water. It's a fact. They've tested for it. So we're drinking water from a very agricultural area. We don't need any more pollutants flowing into our streams. We need the current protection. Our streams are still being damaged under the current protection. Okay. And this legalizing pollution of these intermittent streams, it undermines all of the public programs that are going to try to improve downstream water quality. So our DNR has a state revolving fund that gives out hundreds of millions of dollars each year for wastewater infrastructure improvements for municipalities. Okay, why pour hundreds of millions of dollars into downstream water quality infrastructure if you're just going to allow the intermittent streams, the upstreams, to be polluted? Okay, also our state soil and water conservation fund, millions of dollars that we all pay for whenever we go buy anything, we're paying that state soil and water sales tax, pays for improvements on private property. We talked about, I heard grass waterways. Okay, those grass waterways were very likely funded with public dollars, okay, as an improvement on a landowner's property. Okay, why are we paying for that if we're just going to allow for spilling and pollution into these intermittent streams? It totally represents a huge waste of public funds. Okay, so water flows downstream. Gravity is a powerful force. Don't ignore gravity, okay? Spending money on downstream water quality is futile if upstream water is not protected. We've talked about the groundwater issue again. From what I can calculate, there's almost 2.5 million people in Missouri that drink water from groundwater resources that would be, looks like, not protected under this. Just two more last points. The permits that Missouri DNR, also known as Missouri State Operating Permits, the permits that they issue are not based on the proximity of a facility to waters of the state. They are issued based on the type of the facility, the type of waste, and also the volume. So if a facility wants to do whatever action and they're going to discharge waste, it doesn't matter if that facility is on the top of the hill, on the middle of the hill, or down the banks of the creek. They are going to require a permit. Okay. So what I can figure from my 18 years of doing this work, and how this does impact and what it would do, is it basically shrinks the area of accountability for permitted facilities. So it essentially, for our regulated facilities, gives them more room to spill. Okay, so Senator Carter, I know in your district there's been issues with waste spilling. Now I see a scenario where waste could spill onto a neighbor's property, but if it's no longer of waters of the state, that landowner has no protection from the state of Missouri, and they'd be having to file a private lawsuit. Well, what landowner has the money or wants to do that? Okay, so this, bottom line, this is not a win for Missouri landowners. In closing, again, obviously I'm opposed to this. I think there's thousands of waste discharges in Missouri that are not agriculture related, that basically the state would lose its ability to have enforcement on. We don't want to be like Kansas or Iowa or Nebraska, where their water quality is causing human health issues. You know, Missourians want clean water. I hear it all the time. It drives our tourism. People flock to Missouri from all over the state. And that's because our streams and water resources are superior here than their state. It was 220 years ago when Lewis and Clark passed up the river just out this window, going upstream on their Corps of Discovery, and I would have liked to have seen what our streams looked like at that time. As our state streams have been very damaged and degraded in those last 2 centuries, and it takes so much effort now to even maintain their current quality. Making water quality improvements once something is damaged is very difficult. And the efforts to pass on our water resources to the next generation are the efforts I see with the people I work with every day. I wear a lot of hats, as I know many of you do. I married into a farming family about 15 years ago. I live on a corn, soybean, wheat farm. We do no-till, we do cover crops, we have buffers, etc. We have a farm pond out our window. We have an old hog hut in my front yard when hogs were raised the old-fashioned way. One of my main issues is, as someone that's very close to a farming operation, I cannot think of what a row crop operation or a cattle grazing operation, what activity they want to do or waters of the state makes a difference. Permits that a landowner would need are federal, and so I just don't understand how waters of the state affects a Missouri row crop or cattle grazing operation. What I do see is it opens up where entities that are already regulated have more room to spill and are less accountable for their actions. And, in addition to being a farmer's wife, I'm a mother. I would like to be able to take my kids down to the creek. You can't really take them to these permanent flowing, some rivers are not great places to take kids. Small creeks are great places to take kids unless they're going to end up sick from it.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, once again, thank you. Next, not in favor of Senate Bill 981.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ike Skelton. I am the presiding commissioner of Camden County. I am here in opposition of SB 981, probably for a lot of different reasons than what you've heard. One of the reasons that I am, or one of the things that I do as a member of our county is I am a member of the National Association of Counties. I am on their Environmental, Energy, and Land Use Steering Committee. Recently, we were in Washington, D.C. for the legislative conference, and there are an awful lot of bills and federal interest in waters these days. While sitting in this subcommittee, or the steering committee, an individual from the Agricultural Steering Committee came over and mentioned that they wanted our support. Currently in Colorado, the federal government is giving deference to entities like solar panel farms for water rights. And we know that in Colorado, water is a very big deal and water rights is a big deal. And the cattle farmers out there and ranchers are not able to water their cattle as well if they have to give up these water rights. There are people down in the southern parts of the country that are complaining that they don't have enough water. We have things such as the Trans-America Corridor that, if built, would help move water across the country and maybe even into other countries as they'd like to do. Many years ago, the federal government attempted to have more control over the waterways in this country through the watershed program. The White River Watershed National Blueway was attempted in Missouri, and it would have regulated the watershed in 19 counties of Missouri and almost all of Arkansas. We worked very diligently to fight that and keep the federal government out of Missouri. We did fight that, and they ended that entire program. I am opposed to 981 because I believe that if we align ourselves more with federal government language and what came out of the Supreme Court, that we then may be more easily regulated by the federal government. And I would just ask that you all look again at the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution, states that laws that are made in furtherance of the Constitution are the supreme law of the land. However, I can't find anywhere in the Constitution that gives the federal government the authority to regulate water. So if they don't have the authority in the Constitution to regulate water, how in the world could any laws that they make then be supreme law of the land? I would actually prefer that we go maybe a little bit farther in the state of Missouri, assert our 9th and 10th Amendment sovereignties, and create an organization and throughout the Department of Natural Resources that gets away from federal regulations, that pushes back against federal regulations, and that we would actually maybe even go so far at some time as creating some sort of anti-commandeering doctrine so that the federal government, EPA, and others cannot come into the state of Missouri and force us to do things the way they want us to do it. I know there's a lot of water bills going through the Missouri House this year for some reason. I haven't seen quite a lot of those. And I'm kind of curious that maybe there is some other an alignment of all of these different things so that more regulation and so forth could be more easily put upon the state of Missouri. So again, I oppose SB 981.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, not in favor of 981, please proceed.
First of all, shout out to my neighbor here. Good to see you, Rusty. Doug Doty, Livingston County row crop and cattle farmer. I oppose this bill. I find it a little ironic we're celebrating Thank a Farmer Week as this legislation threatens Missouri's groundwater, the very water that family farmers and rural folks rely upon. This regressive legislation that also threatens landowner protections in our clean water law ignores the crisis of nutrient pollution in our waterways. Nutrients leaving our fields and polluting their way to Missouri waters, eventually intensifying the dead zone in the Gulf with negative impacts to our communities and businesses along the way. Who benefits from this bill? Will 15,000 Livingston Countyans benefit? We have 8 public water systems, all sourced from Livingston County groundwater. Will it benefit the 23-county Northwest Missouri groundwater province that extends from Iowa to the Missouri River? 600,000 plus residents. There is precedence for clean water in Missouri. While this bill negatively impacts clean water, legislation was passed a few years ago to enhance clean, safe water for 100,000 North Missouri residents in 10 counties. During the approval process of the 2,300 28-acre Roy Blunt Reservoir, the North Central Missouri Regional Water Commission scrutinized water protection, source water protection, land oversight, and habitat preservation. Lake authority legislation was passed. Revised Statute of Missouri 67.4520. The result is a high impact zone extending 500 feet outside the property surrounding the reservoir. Think of a halo. This halo provides the Commission with the ability to control and prevent pollution threats from the top of the watershed to the dam, even on private property. Agriculture and local soil and water districts supported this legislation. Stepping back a little further, 40 years ago, agriculture also supported the 1/10 cent sales, park soils and water sales tax, an initiative that continues to have widespread support. An environmental success story, a premium state park system, and a huge reduction in soil erosion, sediment pollution in our waters. Will this unravel the progress of the 1/10 cent sales tax? The park soils and water sales tax is funded by the public. Farmers like me receive generous cost share subsidies, plus other federal conservation program subsidies to reduce soil erosion and nutrient pollution. In exchange for those subsidies, shouldn't we be conscious of the public good? When it comes to water, aren't we all in a high impact zone? I urge you to vote no, and thank you.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, not in favor.
Not in favor for sure, like 100% not in favor. My name's Tim Gibbons. I'm with the Missouri Rural Crisis Center. The last time I was testifying up here, I think I was testifying in favor of Senator Black's bill, which was the bill to stop foreign corporate ownership of Missouri farmland, instead of introducing misguided and very damaging, possibly proposed legislation like this. We should actually be passing bills that people out in rural Missouri care about, like stopping foreign corporate ownership of Missouri farmland. I'm not going to read my testimony because a lot of it was covered. One thing, though, I have sat on the state technical committee, the NRCS state technical committee, since 2007, so a pretty long run with STC, and one of our top priorities is water quality. And through the EQIP program specifically, we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on water quality, and this could potentially unravel and undo all of that, which is a really big deal. Number two, and I won't number them anymore, I don't think. I read a couple pieces of legislation, and we had a meeting with Senator Black about how, and just to paraphrase, how this bill could negatively impact your constituents and the aquifer that your constituents sit on top of. I just asked that in the future, that's a pretty big deal. In the future, before introducing bills that could majorly impact the health and drinking water of Missourians, that we should fix those mistakes before the bill is even introduced. There's a lot of conversation about coming in line with federal. I'm sort of sick of that corporate narrative, because the federal laws are meant to be like the foundation, and then the states are supposed to build upon it. It's not that we're supposed to go down to that base level of regulation. It screams of corporate favoritism. This entire bill screams of corporate favoritism. The Denali bills that we're in favor of are in response to us not having enough protections of our water in our state. So this is the opposite of the Denali bill. So it doesn't seem like one hand knows what the other hand's doing at times. And we're in favor of your bill, Senator Carter. And then last but not least, we represent cattle producers, thousands of family farmers across our state. In the U.S., this may be germane, I hope it is. In the U.S., as of the 2022 census, since 2017, we lost 150,000 cattle producers. We lost 10,000 cattle producers just in the state of Missouri. We need to be working on issues that actually save family farmers, like antitrust, like taking on the big meat packers, not passing bills that are the status quo, pro-corporate, pro-meat packer legislation, and that's what this is. So instead of doing this type of proposed legislation, we need to do things that people out in rural Missouri are actually talking about, and that's saving independent cattle production. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? Senator Carter.
Can you tell me what your thoughts are on why we're losing our?
We have four meat packers that control 85% of the beef marketplace, JBS, Tyson, Cargill, and Marfrig. JBS is a Brazilian meat packer. They also control 25% of our pork in our country. They also control Pilgrim's Pride Poultry. So meat packers like that. We also imported in 2023 3.7 billion pounds of boxed beef, and we imported 1.6, I think, million live cattle, mostly from Canada and Mexico, but the boxed beef came from all around the world. So the ability of these meat packers to import-export their way to prosperity, pay producers less, make consumers pay more, is a way that they're putting independent cattle producers out of business. One of the many ways, and the type of this constant corporate narrative of legislation that isn't actually addressing the real issues that are happening out in.
So it has nothing really to do with this bill specifically, but just.
Well, indirectly, I think tangentially, we need to be working on those issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Next, not in favor.
Good morning. Thank you for having us here today. I'll be brief. I have written testimony that I will attach, but a lot of the points that I wanted to make have already been said, but I'll hit a few real quick. Just want to reiterate that this bill is seeking to fix a problem that doesn't exist. It's being pushed by a very few industries or maybe one particular person to create confusion. The definition of the waters of the United States does not necessitate any change of the waters of the state.
Could you repeat your name and who you're with?
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't say it. My apologies. Melissa Vatterap, Missouri Coalition for the Environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. The waters of the state does not have to be change just because the EPA changes waters of the U.S., as people have already talked about, federalism and how the state can be stricter, okay? One thing I just want to add that no one else has said is that if you go and look at other states' definitions of waters of the state, they're basically the same as what we already have on the books. Waters that are within or adjacent to our state are waters of the state, unless they are a water body that's only on one property, essentially, okay? So what we have is standard. It makes sense. Why would we make it any different? It's creating confusion, as you've heard other people say. There's been talk about farm ponds, and to the point that I just made about the definition, saying that if it's on one parcel, it's not a waters of the state. Farm ponds that are on one farm parcel was never a waters of the state. So we don't need to be confused about whether those farm ponds are going to be regulated or have been or will be by DNR, because that's not the point here. I'll just conclude that I hope that you will vote in the way that is going to protect the majority of Missourians over the few industries that I think are behind this bill. And with that, Missouri Coalition for the Environment asks you to oppose this bill.
Any questions for the witness?
Thank you.
See none. Thank you for testimony. Next, not in favor. How many more are not in favor? Just 1, 2, 4 more.
Hello, committee. My name is Ethan Duke. I'm with the Missouri River Bird Observatory. We've heard many people here, experts in hydrology or experts in water quality, experts from policy angles talk about this. You've heard from urban and rural people about this issue. So this issue is a people issue. This isn't one of those divisive ones. And that we all can agree that we want clean water. We have different ways we want to go about getting there, but we should have that right to clean water. And because of that, I want to urge you not to move this bill one step further. That's not a right we want to mess around with. I like mapping things. I'm kind of good at that. I grew up hunting and fishing. I've always loved nature. Now I combine my technical skills with that passion to measure stuff in nature. I like that. I like the science of it. I'm passionate about it. And I've used it to measure the amount of pollution in our watersheds. I've even measured it in our Senate districts, by House district, by different hydrological units. And I think, and most of this pollution that I've been able to measure comes from factory farms. It's that same stuff that goes, like you were asking earlier, where does this go from here to there? Where does it come from these barns? Well, it gets applied to the landscape. And then it goes down into our waterways and down to the Gulf of Mexico, where we got 6,000 square mile dead zone in the Gulf, directly as a result of nutrients. 31% of Iowa's nutrients come right down our Missouri River, by the way, contributing to that, all from that same system. Excess nutrients is a result of continued weakening of policy. This kind of thing is kind of reckless, and it's removing water protections. Do you think it was a priority of the constituents of that district to have this legislation move forward? No. You know what this smells like. You know exactly what it is. This should cause all of us to look a little bit more closely at the health of our watersheds. Examine who is writing the policy to undermine the right to clean water and craft legislation to enshrine. We should enshrine those rights to clean water. Be working the other way for the people, not the moneyed interests. That's all I have to say. I'll answer any questions you have on specifics.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Where do I put this?
You can just lay it right there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christine Dorr from Columbia. Grew up in Rolla. Grew up on the rivers, ate fish every week from when I was old enough to eat until I left home. Senator Black mentioned accepting funds, federal funds, state funds to create some ponds or something, but then he doesn't want them to be tested. I think that's strange. As a member of the U.S. Navy, My water was tested. Because of the nature of my work, I occasionally had to turn in urine samples to be tested for drugs. And I allowed that to happen, and it's much more invasive. Another word that a word that I have problem with is a ditch. When we use the term ditch, people think, oh, it's nothing. Well, I used to catch crawfish in ditches, and we ate them for dinner. Waterways, ditches oftentimes are our mountain streams. I don't know how many of you have actually drank from springs, gone down and taken a cup out of the earth and drink it. But fewer and fewer of us have that memory. Fewer and fewer of us have the memory of clean, pure, clean water. Rivers that had plants growing not down to the very edge of the water, that weren't just eroded away because of a denigration of our regulations to protect our streams. I'm here to speak about water, my children's water, but your children and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I want to protect everyone. I have witnessed the denigration of our waterways. If anything, we need to be turning around and going the other way. We need more protection for our water. I strongly urge you to vote against this 981. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, not in favor of Senate Bill 981.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Steve Carroll. And while I am a registered lobbyist for the Missouri Rural Crisis Center, I come up today for it as a farmer. And my family has farmed and raised Black Angus cattle in northeast Missouri since the 1850s. And while the hierarchy of the Missouri Cattlemen's Association and Missouri Farm Bureau have come up and testified for the bill, as a member of those two organizations, I want to go on record in opposition to the bill. I just think that the current law has been working well for over 50 years. I don't see the need to change it.
Any questions? Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, not in favor.
Dawn Nicholas, here for Missouri Parks Association. We'd like to go on record in opposition, and lengthy testimony is attached.
Any questions for the witness? Thank you very much for your testimony. Next up, not in favor. Seeing none. Informational purposes, please come forward. Okay.
Thank you, Senator Black. Mr. Chairman, my name is John Bognar. I'm a hydrogeologist. I've been working in understanding and analyzing fluid flow in the subsurface for almost a half a century. As my profession, I never worked for a government agency. I'm always in private practice. So I feel that I'm qualified to opine on the technical nature of the definition of waters of the state and hydrogeology, what an aquifer means, what groundwater means, et cetera. I am here representing the American Institute of Professional Geologists. That's a member organization of 7,000 people nationwide. I am past president of that organization, and I'm here to speak specifically for the that organization's Missouri section. We have about 100 members here. We do not opine in favor or against any particular legislation. We feel it's our duty because of our nature as scientists that we can provide politically neutral information for you folks who are the experts in writing legislation, and that's what we're here for. I am very impressed with everybody on both for and against the bill, what they had to say today. There's a couple of things that I would like to point out, Senator Black, regarding the ponds not being connected to. That may be very well true and probably is in your part of the world, but there's a pond down in West Plains that broke loose several years ago. It was basically a farm, not a farm pond, but it was a rural pond that some of the waste for the city of West Plains went into, and it's in the karst area. Attorney Jeffries over here mentioned you could probably call it a lagoon. Yeah. And so hydraulically, that doesn't matter if it's a pond or a lagoon. It's a water pushing force onto the subsurface below it. That thing broke loose, and that contamination ended up in Arkansas, some 25 miles away through the karst system. So one size does not fit all is what hydrogeologists might say about that. You may be exactly correct in your neck of the woods, but in another neck of the woods, you would be incorrect. And so a big point here is that the geology of Missouri is very, very complex. We've got, I could talk for hours on it, but I won't. Let's just say that it's complex, and each part of the state has its own nature of how groundwater behaves and how it interacts with the streams, how it interacts with wetlands. That's unique to many, many different places in the state of Missouri. So it's for a bill to have one size fits all. It really it doesn't in the case of Missouri. Very, very complex. Okay. I wanted to talk about the bill itself. It's been mentioned that the current definition does include subsurface waters of the state, and another word for that is groundwater. Those words are interchangeable. Groundwater and subsurface water, those are interchangeable. When I was in the hallway here this morning waiting to get into this packed event, I heard some discussion about the term perched water. Perched water is something that sits above a classic aquifer, but nonetheless, in some cases, perched groundwater is the only water available for some of Missouri's residents. It's their only water source. So some people may say, well, perched water is not important because it doesn't spread over a region or a county or even several thousand feet. But it is very much important, and it should be considered as a part of subsurface and groundwater. One thing and the last thing I want to leave you with, I had a lot to talk about here, but I think everybody hit these points very, very well. But I do want to point out one thing. The term aquifer. It is not a substitute for the term groundwater. It is not. An aquifer is defined by, if I put 10 hydrogeologists such as myself in the room, you're going to get 10 definitions of aquifer. Okay? You're not going to get 10 definitions of the word groundwater. Groundwater means groundwater. Aquifers can be a highly variable term. Okay? And so I will say that the way the bill is proposed right now, the definition of aquifer would exclude, this is my guess, but it's an educated guess, it would exclude 95% of all groundwater in the state of Missouri. It's totally inappropriate. Not inappropriate. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So those are kind of the big things that I wanted to mention. That we do have. This is a science. We can answer these questions highly specifically. It's a mature science, and so when you have these questions, there are scientific organizations more than willing. We have volunteered in the past to help, for instance, the Clean Water Commission to define waters of the state. That went, they felt as if that assistance wasn't needed, but the American Institute of Professional Geologists would be happy to help any stakeholder group define waters of the state for any reason, sir. And that concludes my testimony.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Anybody here for informational purposes only? Seeing none, Senator Black, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, really quick. Seemed like it was a block class in ag on soils and conservation as well as water. So we've learned quite a bit. As we leave and I go back up there, we try to go to the next bill. I do want to remind people also that I was a bus driver and sponsored, I think, the first middle school exchange program for Stream Team. We went from the Rubidoo at Waynesville to the Grand River. Those kids got to see a lot of different water. And, of course, if you drive bus, we know where we have to pee all the time.
Thank you, Senator. This will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 981. Next up will be Senate Bill 1416. If anybody happens to be here for emerging issues, the next committee hearing, it's been canceled. Just kind of letting you know. So, Senator Black, do you care to take the gavel?
How are you?
Go ahead.
Senator, thank you very much for the last about hour and a half. Please, if you would, begin presenting the senator's bill that you're carrying today. So begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Jason Bean, State Senator from the 25th District. I'm here presenting this bill for Senator Justin Brown, representing the 16th Senatorial District, who could not be here today. So I'm here to present Senate Bill 1416. Senate Bill 1416 allows existing process in place under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, FIFRA, to be sufficient to satisfy any requirements for a warning label. This would apply to all crop protection products regulated by FIFRA and would be consistent with a recent opinion from the U.S. Court of Appeals. After an opinion article was announced in 2015 and California utilized this opinion to trigger its Prop 65 cancer warning requirement, U.S. trial lawyers began running advertising campaigns to recruit people for lawsuits. The current U.S. glyphosate litigation began just months after the publication of that opinion. In April 2019, the EPA published the results of its latest assessment of glyphosate and stated, EPA continues to find that there are no risks in public health when glyphosate is used in accordance with this label. Senator Brown filed Senate Bill 14 because a company should not be required to warn consumers of something that no regulatory body around the globe has found to be true, nor should they have to be sued because of such. Thank you for your time today. And with that, I would probably ask to listen to the witnesses behind me.
Okay. First, how many witnesses for? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm doing a count for you, Senator. That was 8 for. How many opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 opposed. So 8 and 4, Senator, and here's your gavel.
Please proceed. Oh, yep, sorry.
Sorry. Board certified toxicologist. Is that better? I'm here today in support of Senate Bill 1416. I want to thank Chairman Bean and the committee for hearing this important issue and Senator Brown for sponsoring the legislation. As many of you know, Bayer has deep roots in Missouri, stretching back more than 120 years. We have several thousand employees working in Missouri, primarily in St. Louis, which is the home of our company's crop science business and global headquarters for our seeds and traits business. We also operate a large production facility with hundreds of Bayer employees in Kansas City. As a company focused on achieving our mission of health for all, hunger for none, Missouri is a critical part of our efforts to bring new tools and technologies to farmers here and around the globe. St. Louis is the hub of our innovation and the U.S. headquarters for research and development. We're proud to invest more than $2.5 billion annually in global research and development innovations for crop science, more than double the amount of any of our competitors. Bayer is the manufacturer of Roundup agricultural herbicides, which include the active ingredient glyphosate. In fact, Bayer is the only domestic producer of glyphosate. These products have been the subject of litigation and significant media attention for years. Despite the clear statutory language and decades of judicial precedent in place under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, known as FIFRA, states have started to regulate pesticides in a manner that directly contradicts the EPA's decades-long conclusions regarding their safety. Some states, like California, have attempted to impose a labeling requirement on this product that is contradictory to existing regulations in the expansive body of science. SB 1416 would simply ensure that any pesticide registered with the EPA and sold under a label consistent with the EPA's own determination is sufficient to satisfy requirements for health and safety warnings. It does not preclude anyone from suing pesticide manufacturers. It only affects the health and safety warning labels that already have an extensive regulatory process in place to warn of known potential harms caused by a pesticide. Pesticides undergo a rigorous development and review process, sometimes taking 12 years on average before they are introduced into the field. This strict regulatory process, including multiple agencies and hundreds of scientific experts, ensures that the pesticides on the market have met high health and environmental safety standards and are safe for use according to the EPA specifications. Once a pesticide reaches the market, these same scientists continue to review all new studies to guarantee the safety of existing products. In fact, regulatory bodies around the world, including the US EPA, have looked at Roundup for nearly 50 years and found no risks of concern to human health from use of glyphosate. Even European Union regulators have found that the available scientific evidence did not meet the criteria to classify glyphosate as a carcinogen and recently renewed its use for the next 10 years. For nearly half a century, glyphosate has been an instrumental tool in allowing American farmers to affordably protect crops from weeds, keep yields high, and compete in the global market. Glyphosate is critical to conservation practices, including soil conservation through reduced tillage, which results in less soil erosion, fuel savings, and less carbon emissions. Missouri farmers rely on pesticides. Glyphosate is used on 66% of corn acres, 91% of soybean acres, and 98% of cotton acres in the state. Without pesticides, crop losses could be as high as 85%, and without glyphosate, farmers' input costs could more than double. Bayer remains dedicated to farmers and American agriculture, and Roundup is a crucial tool for both. And while glyphosate is the topic today, if not addressed, the future of other valuable crop protection tools and critical innovations may also be at stake. This is why we need your help today. We need legislative certainty that while states have every right to build on the federal government's baseline regulations, they should not have the ability to directly contradict the scientific findings and ignore the rigorous review process already in place. If farmers can't rely on a consistent set of science-based rules, it becomes very difficult to make long-term plans on what to plant, how much, and when, making an already challenging profession even harder. The legal challenges we've been facing for more than 5 years have not only caused significant legal costs, but also many uncertainties. Continuing to lose billions of dollars on an approved product and based on scientifically unsound claims is not sustainable. Money invested in litigation costs could otherwise be invested into R&D, bringing new tools and innovations to farmers. It's becoming more and more attainable to see a path forward without some sort of legislative certainty. The industry needs your help, and we need your help to protect a safe, effective, and invaluable tool for farmers here and around the globe. I respectfully ask you to vote to pass Senate Bill 1416 and move it to the Senate floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one question. You said Bayer is the only one that's domestically producing glyphosate?
I believe that's true.
So then if Bayer were to not produce glyphosate, where would we be getting our glyphosate from?
I can't say for sure, but my guess would be China.
Okay. Any questions for the witness? Senator Black?
Yes, thank you. I think you stated this, but I would like to hear it again because I don't remember stuff very well. How many studies have been done around glyphosate, and for sure looking at the carcinogenic side of it, about how many studies you, hopefully not guess, you've got a range that you believe is pretty accurate?
I believe there was a range. I don't have that range with me or top of mind, but we can follow up with that.
Okay, but it's several.
It's
correct?
thousands. It's thousands of studies, hundreds of studies, probably addressing the specifics of carcinogenicity.
Yeah. since the old ag teacher part of me, you know, I even had students when this new product came on the market years ago. It was something, a new mode of action that we studied at home and thought it was going to be quite the change. I think there was what American Cyanamid and Monsanto at that time was about ready to maybe not survive, and God provided them this opportunity to come up with this in my mind. So out of those studies, you probably do know this answer. How many studies have really pointed and said glyphosate is a carcinogen?
I can't say that exact number. I'm sorry. I'm not a deep expert on glyphosate for sure. Those people I work with, they're my colleagues.
Okay.
But I can say that when regulatory decisions are made under FIFRA, like at the US EPA, all of the studies are considered. Those ones that are supportive, those studies that are perhaps not supportive, and that's the essence of how the science works. Regulatory agencies consider the breadth of those studies and then make a decision based on their assessment and the weight of evidence.
All right. Thank you.
Senator Carter, did you have a question?
Yes, just a quick question. Is glyphosate being, I just did a quick search and it says that there are states that are looking to ban glyphosate. Is that true?
I can't speak to that. I'm not sure, but we can follow up.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. And then just out of curiosity, again, just trying to do my research here. DDT, sometimes it takes science a while to catch up, right? So a quick search, and DDT was banned in 1972 after 30 years of use. And after, let's see, I made a note here, over 1 billion pounds was used. And so sometimes, you know, it does take a while for science to catch up to the cause and effect of certain things, right?
Yeah, I believe that's so, in the case for DDT. Now, of course, keeping in mind that the regulatory environment in the early 70s, late 60s, when DDT was used, is very different than the regulatory environment now.
So what about talcum powder and some things? I mean, are we at a point where we're giving deference entirely to the federal government and the regulation that's overseen there? Or do we have pause or concern just by some of the effects with some of the litigation to say that there might be a reason to pause or have a concern?
Well, I think that's the essence of policy decisions, right? You have to look at the breadth of the scientific evidence and make judgments.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, and so I think that's why we have regulatory agencies the way they do, because they can operate in an unbiased manner and look at everything and come up with the best decision based on the weight of evidence. And I think overwhelmingly, not just the US EPA, but every regulatory agency around the world has looked at an enormous amount of data and come to the same conclusion that that glyphosate is not carcinogenic.
There is some movement, though, to ban it in some areas that I'm seeing. So I just asking.
About that, I can't say anything. I don't know.
Okay, sure, appreciate it. Thank you.
Any further questions for the witness? Senator Washington.
Hi, thank you for coming down.
Sure.
You mentioned that this would only change the warning. It would not have anything to do with the legal responsibilities for Roundup producers.
I'm not an attorney, so I can't.
You specifically said that this wouldn't prevent suits or, I mean, you said that, so I'm just trying to get what you said.
That's correct. This only addresses the issue of warning and the
Okay.
safety assessment in the federal label.
Okay, and you mentioned having many legal challenges now. Are those the class action lawsuits against Roundup?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so those would continue, or this would not bear any immunity, correct?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of Senate Bill 1460. And like I say, if you all want to make your way, other witnesses want to make your way, and Peace City, we've got plenty of chairs here.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Stefan Knudsen. I represent MOAG, where I sit on the board, Missouri Agribusiness Association. My day job is general counsel with MFA, a farmer cooperative out of Columbia, Missouri. But I also come to you today as a farmer, lifelong farmer. My wife and I have a small row crop and cattle operation in Boone County. I come in support of Senate Bill 1416, in large part, and I won't repeat what the previous witness said, but MOAG represents ag retailers, which MFA is one of, and ag retailers and producers work together to utilize pesticides in a responsible way to keep weeds under control, weeds and pests that would otherwise rob fertility, nutrients, water, and productivity from our operations. Would also add that the current process with FIFRA and the labeling process is a vigorous process that takes into account ecological concerns as well as human health concerns, carcinogenic classifications, and information. This bill would prevent duplicative and potentially inconsistent labeling requirements from the basic manufacturers. Again, we are retailers, so we rely on these basic manufacturers to research and develop and bring products to the marketplace through the FIFRA and EPA process, for which we can then work with our patrons and farmers and ranchers to responsibly apply per the label requirements. A quick word about the labeling process. These labeling processes are rigorous, science-based, and responsible retailers and producers rely on them as the gold standard. And so for that reason, I think it's important that this committee recognize how reliable the research is that goes into these labels. And so we believe the current system with the manufacturers, the retailers, the producers, through the EPA and FIFRA process is something that can be relied upon, such that additional labeling requirements would be unnecessary. Lastly, I would just mention that I'm attaching with my form here the EPA's own overview of risk assessments, and it's a nice web page that sets out the degree to which they research these products and how they work through the labeling process before they're brought to market, and covering, of course, storage, disposal, use, and every aspect of those products. And so with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Senator Carter?
So changing the label to where it's sufficient under the FDA or the EPA doesn't change the liability at all? Because if you're saying that it's a non-carcinogen,
I'm saying I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just as that's the question I have in my mind. If you're changing it to where it says now that this is not labeled as a non-carcinogen, does not impact the liability? That if a farmer says wanted to sue or potentially sue because of negative health impacts, it wouldn't?
Here's what I would say about that. The carcinogenic properties of these products is analyzed by the EPA through a reliable science-based program and taken into account when those labels are generated. Beyond that, I'm not sure I can speak to that today, but those are taken into account, and you'll see that in the EPA risk assessment program.
So why not just leave the labeling as it is?
The EPA labeling, ma'am?
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's what this bill would seek to do, is to shore up and ensure that the singular label that is attached to those pesticides would be the EPA label.
Right, but declaring it a non-carcinogen, essentially.
I'm not sure. I can't speak to the degree to which it does or does not declare it a carcinogen. And maybe you're thinking of glyphosate specifically or pesticides generally, but I would only add that I believe the EPA process takes into account the carcinogenic properties of those products.
So going back to, I guess, the original question then is, would this change the liability? Would this give you more liability protection from someone who potentially thinks that down the road they were negatively impacted by the pesticide?
So our company, the retailers do not manufacture the products. As for the ultimate, under any conceivable theory, liability for the basic manufacturers, I'm not sure I can speak to that today.
Okay. Well, it would seem like if you're here to try to change the labeling, you might be able to answer, because I think it could negatively impact the liability that you have as a company for the labeling. And so if you're here to make the case that the labeling needs to be underneath the EPA and it's sufficient,
okay,
then I'm wondering, how does that negatively, or will it negatively impact the liability you ensue by being able to just do this one label?
Are you asking if additional labeling requirements would create liability or shield from liability?
This labeling, yes. The question is, will this labeling change the liability or the lawsuits or anybody being able to bring a lawsuit if they feel like the product impacted their health in a negative way?
On that ultimate question, I'm not sure I can speak to every conceivable theory, but as it pertains to additional labeling requirements put on by the state of Missouri, this bill would say the EPA label is the only label for that purpose.
So it does or does not change liability?
I'm not sure I can speak to the ultimate issue of liability across the board.
Okay.
Any further questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of Senate Bill 1416, please proceed. And if you, once again, if you fill out a witness form, please leave it on the table, and you can fill out one online as well. Please proceed.
I'm Randy Rogers. I'm currently chairman of the Missouri Agribusiness Association. I'm here to speak on as a representative, but what I'm really here to speak at is as a father and a grandfather, and we work at Service and Supply Co-op. Our co-op has 6 locations in East Central Missouri, and we have been so I'm concerned about the safety and of the food we eat, the plentifulness of it. As you can tell, I like to eat well, and so it's important to maintain that food supply and the safety of that food supply for my kids and grandchildren. And as a representative of Service and Supply Co-op, it's also extremely important for the safety of our employees, our farmers, and our customers that we deal with each and every day. We've used, I don't want to speak strictly to Roundup, except for the fact that we've used it for 50 years and have had no issues with our farmers or our employees. But I want to broaden this to FIFRA to be broader, so that we have had impressed upon us time after time after time, the label is the law. If the label says it's a non-carcinogen, then it may change the liability. But the label is the law. The label has to, EPA has done an excellent job of, they're the best in the world. Now, I'm in the middle. I'm kind of a middleman here. I have farmers that cuss EPA, but I know in our business and on MoAg board, the EPA is a science-based organization that uses science to provide safe products. And the label is specifically, we have different labels. They're 15 to 20 pages long, some of them, and they address the handling procedures that we need to use to protect the safety of our employees and of our farmers. And I want to speak from the heart to that we're not going to use products that are dangerous to our customers, but there is a risk assessment. Nothing is 100% safe. The water, we discussed water for an hour and a half this morning. No, the water we drink may or may not be safe. It may be safer out of the faucet than it is out of a water bottle, but the label is the law. And we have been taught as an ag retailer, as a farmer, and as a parent that it's important that we follow the label and use those procedures to protect the safety of our employees and our customers. So because of that, I'm in favor of this bill that says the label is the law, and support that FIFRA has done is the procedure that we need to use to follow that. Thank you. Any questions?
You know, you mentioned product safety, and that's something, I'm a farmer, same thing, use Roundup, my whole life. And it is a huge concern of mine to know if we become reliant upon getting this product from China, just what safety concerns are out there. I mean, it's a huge concern of mine because, we've opened up totes before and gone, we got problems. And that comes from anything that's usually produced in China. So appreciate your comments. Any questions for the witness, Senator Carter?
Does the change of the label remove the product off the shelves or the access?
Well, it could severely reduce the opportunity and availability for us to use. I mean, if there's restrictions, in the number of places we can and cannot use it, or if the label makes it difficult for us to use it. There are products that we do not use today because the label is too restrictive.
So just to your point, I guess what I'm trying to understand is just that. If the farmer, a label doesn't change access, right? Or not?
It can. The label can restrict areas where we can use it. Some labels restrict us from spraying next to certain products. We have to have a buffer. We have to stay back 120 feet. We have to do, if the label says that, that's the law. We are required to follow that.
Okay, thank you.
And one more thing that I forgot to mention, we've had a lot of discussion here about clean water for an hour and a half, and we are totally in favor of that. Roundup and the chemicals that we use are one of the things that we are helping to clean up nutrients and soil out of our waterways. No-till and conservation practices that we use, that Roundup specifically and many of our other chemicals, help us provide more no-till and more cover crops, and each of those products help filter the nutrients and the soil out of our rivers. Thank you.
Any further questions for the witness? Seeing none, next in favor, please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Adam Castor. I'm a corn and soybean farmer from Carroll County and serve on the Missouri Corn Growers Association Board of Directors. I am here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 1416 on behalf of the Missouri Corn Growers Association. I represent the 7th generation of our family farm. We've been operating here in Missouri for 206 years. I own and operate the farm with my father and my wife and kids today. We take a lot of pride in this rich history and our commitment to our farm's two most vital components, a healthy living soil and the people who see after it. My farm is rather unique in the broad spectrum of crop production methods we utilize. We range from no-till to cover crops to minimum till to conventional till, only when needed and when necessary. Crop protection products like glyphosate are an instrumental tool in allowing us this wide range of production practices so we can reduce tillage passages, allowing us to burn less fuel, conserve water, and help reduce soil erosion, still while being able to maintain a clean field of yield-robbing pests and weeds. I believe Senate Bill 1416 will provide important legislative certainty to farmers and landowners who rely on crop protection products regulated by the EPA. The legal uncertainties that crop production products face today create concerns about whether or not these products will be available to us in the marketplace in the future. Many of these crop production products, like glyphosate, are a fundamental tool for effective pest and weed control programs and corn production used widely by other farmers in Missouri. If we were to lose products like glyphosate, I would be forced back into conventional tillage methods for weed control that would be more costly and put our soils and nutrients at risk to wind and soil erosion. I've heard countless stories from my dad and grandpa about the old days when they'd have to field cultivate the fields 4 and 5 times ahead of the planter just to combat weeds, and often at times just tear up a good crop in order to combat weeds and have to start back over at square one. The fact is, Missouri farmers need the latest and greatest tools to remain competitive in a global marketplace. This is extremely important to me to ensure that my family farm can remain competitive in the future, so my 8-year-old son has the opportunity to represent the 8th generation of our family farm and to carry the Castor name on and care for and live off the land to help provide for an ever-growing world population. I appreciate being given the opportunity to testify here today in support of Senate Bill 1416 and share how it could impact my family farming operation. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness?
Just real quick.
Senator Washington.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm just curious, how will this help you? How will changing the label help you?
By allowing to keep products like these available to us in the marketplace.
So without this change, then Roundup and other similar products would be removed from the marketplace?
It could be, if there becomes, with the lawsuits against the products, whether it has to do with the warning labels being on the label or whatnot, if these companies quit producing these products, we're not going to have them to our disposal to use, and we'll be back into the conventional tillage methods that we've been utilizing in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? I have a question. Are you concerned about herbicide-resistant weeds?
I am.
That's something that concerns me because we see it. I mean, we've fought this forever.
And when we start having to be reliant on products that we really don't know from China, that's a big concern for me. I don't know if it is for you as well.
You're correct, sir. We fight resistant weeds. We do everything we can to combat them, to stay ahead of them. Making applications according to a label on weed size and timing of those applications. It's hard for these companies to come up with new active ingredients to be at our disposal for use, and that's something we need them to continue to fight and to seek out new active ingredients that will help us combat these weeds. Because if we don't, we're gonna lose the battle with the resistant weeds.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next here in favor, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Casey Wasser here testifying in support of this legislation on behalf of the Missouri Soybean Association. It's going to be tough to follow that excellent testimony. Well done. I will say I don't believe that this legislation changes the label. I just want to make that clear. What it says is that the label is the law. It says that if a product has gone through the FIFRA process and the EPA has deemed it not to be carcinogenic, that is enough for a failure to warn clause. And I also wanted to point out that while we support this legislation fully and think that it is important that we have proper technologies, if a member of my association that I represent feels like they have been harmed, and this protects for failure to warn, there are plenty of other legal avenues for a farmer or an impacted party to sue for negligence. So, when you're talking about this legislation, I think it's very important that you don't think because you're saying the label is the law, because you're saying if you've gone through this process, that is warning because it should be. There are other pathways for farmers or others impacted to take suit forward. So we fully support what this bill stands for. We support Bayer in this state. We support the products that they have. And we think that it is important to set precedents that says when a government agency has went through this rigorous process, has published a label, and we as farmers follow that label, that is the law. There should not be this complicated process where someone can say, I've been failed to be warned. We would rather all this money that they're having to pay out for these lawsuits be put into research and development to help us continue to fight that weed problem that you just mentioned. So with that, be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions to the witness? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next here in favor of Senate Bill 1416.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Clarissa Cawthorn. I am a farmer from Audrain County. My husband and I raise corn, soybeans, wheat, alfalfa, and have a cow-calf operation, all while wrangling 3 children. I had a long testimony, which you all seem to really enjoy really long testimonies written out for you. But I'm going to completely change it because it is very similar to Adam's. My husband and I run a no-till operation and utilize herbicides throughout the growing season to maintain our soil and food safety. But I have to giggle because I'm thinking about supper last night. I pulled a bag of frozen corn out of my fridge. For the last 3 generations, my family has put up corn from outside our back door to eat throughout the entire year. My kids kind of eat it like popsicles. They just grab it right out of the freezer like a bunch of heathens because that's what they choose to do. But that is Roundup Ready sweet corn. And as we talked today, I had to think that as I produce the food for not only you and the people behind me, it is also very important that the food my children are eating is very safe. And so the EPA does a rigorous testing on that, that we believe as farmers, that label is the law. If we don't find that those, or if we don't follow those use rates, those application procedures and wear the proper PPE, we're not being safe for ourselves. And I'm not being safe for those popsicles that my kids strewn all the way across my house, okay? So we appreciate your time today. All we're asking as we are favor for this bill is that you give the EPA the opportunity to have scientific-based research decisions. And so I appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you for being here. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you again. Next here in favor of Senate Bill 1416.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. And members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be before you. My name is Richard Fordyce. I'm a farmer from Harrison County and here to speak in favor of Senate Bill 1416. As a brief introduction, I've been a farmer since 1983. My life took a little bit of a different change in 2013 when I actually had the honor of serving in the great state of Missouri as director of the Missouri Department of Agriculture. Followed that up with a stint in the previous presidential administration as the administrator of the Farm Service Agency. So yes, Senator, I was a Fed for a while. I say that and some other experiences.
I think I'm gonna gavel you on that one, but anyway.
Some other experiences in my agriculture leadership career. I served as chairman of the State Soil and Water Commission for a number of years, appointed by Senator Blunt, and also served on the United Soybean Board as a director from Missouri. In our farming operation, we have fully embraced, and we've heard this before, but fully embraced conservation tillage, no-till, the introduction of cover crops in our farming system. What that can do for, and we had a very long hearing this morning on water. What that can do for water quality, reduction in soil erosion, improved water quality is really truly amazing, and we've adopted those systems now for almost a decade. I say that to say that, and we're talking glyphosate, I guess, more specifically this morning. The use of glyphosate in the management of those practices is critical. And if we, and I know we heard it from Mr. Kasner. If somehow, as a producer in Missouri, because of lawsuits against manufacturers, we lose the ability to have access to that product, it will revert us back to some very not environmentally friendly farming practices in order to continue to operate. So I wanted to be off the cuff, but I do have actually something that I will say that is prepared. Basically, what Senate Bill 1416 does is simply say, for the purposes of a health and safety warning, the existing regulatory processes in place under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, also known as FIFRA, shall be sufficient to satisfy any requirement for a warning label. This would apply to all crop protection products regulated by FIFRA and would be consistent with a recent opinion from the U.S. Court of Appeals finding California's Prop 65 warning for glyphosate to be unconstitutional. I actually have a family too, Senator. My wife actually came down from Harrison County with me this morning, and she's here as well. Clarissa, we are not wrangling our children anymore. They're adults. They have been a part of the farming operation, and my dad will turn 91 in April. So we've been using these products. He's been using these products all of his farming career. I am completely. I put faith in the federal government and the rigorous standards in which those regulatory agencies put these products in. In order to get a label approved, it takes up to a decade, and that time is used to do testing, and that testing continues even after that product is approved and the label is approved. One final thing I will say, my time on the United Soybean Board, I served as chair of, at that time, what we called the Biotech Committee at USB. I traveled to Europe a number of times, provided testimony in front of the European Parliament about the safety of biotech products and those chemistries. I had the opportunity to sit in the Director General's office for the European Union, or European Parliament, in his office, and I think it was more for effect, but there were manila folders stuffed with papers in his office that stacked from the floor to the ceiling. He said these are 300 research studies that have been commissioned by the European Parliament about biotechnology and the chemistries associated with that. Every one of them have found that product to be safe. With that, I'll end my comments and welcome questions.
Thank you for your service, not only in the state of Missouri, but nationally also. And like I say, I appreciate everything you're doing and have done. And thank you. Any questions for witness? Thank you for testimony.
Thank you.
Next, in favor of.
Hello again, Mr. Chairman, committee member. Dan Engerman, representing Missouri Farm Bureau. Once again, it's hard to top. It's hard to top all the great testimony already given. Obviously, Missouri Farm Bureau, we believe it's important to maintain as many crop protection tools as we can. So therefore, we want to go in support of this good legislation. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Thank you for testimony. Next, in favor of Senate Bill 1416.
Good morning. Kara Corches on behalf of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and probably no surprise to you both. One of our top priorities every year is ensuring that we have a fair legal climate in the state, because we know if our businesses are subject to, limitless amounts of job-crushing lawsuits, those businesses are likely to move to other states where the risk isn't that high. I do want to point out, and this is something that Mr. Wasser stated, this bill just ensures protection from failure to warn claims. There are still other legal pathways for litigation. However, again, we want to make sure there's fairness in our legal system for manufacturers. They provide so many great paying jobs for our economy, keep a lot of Missourians in the job and great quality of life. So we want to make sure we protect our legal climate and make sure we're competitive with our neighboring states. And we think this bill is another tool to doing so. So for that, I'm happy to testify here in support and can take any questions you may have.
Any questions for the witness? Thank you for your testimony. Anybody here else in favor of Senate Bill 1416? In favor of? Anybody here not in favor of Senate Bill 1416? Not in favor. Please come forward. So don't forget to fill out a witness form either here or online and leave it with us. Please proceed.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Matt Clement. I'm an attorney from here in Jefferson City. I've been practicing law for almost 30 years. I appreciate you taking the time to hear me today. I'm opposed to this bill because it would essentially give immunity to herbicide and pesticide chemical manufacturers in the state of Missouri, including immunity to foreign companies like Kim China and Bayer. This bill puts corporations over people. I learned a lot about the regulation of this industry because I represented 3 people in a case that was recently heard here in Cole County who used Roundup and got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I've never advertised for a case in my life. I took those cases because I thought they had merit. So one of those folks, Jimmy Drager, lives in Eldon, Missouri, just down the road from here. He now doesn't have half his foot. He can't walk without crutches, and he still has to take chemotherapy. 2 other people, Daniel Anderson is 42 years old and has stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, isn't expected to make it out of his 50s. Valerie Gunther is in her 60s. She now lives in isolation in her home because the last available treatment that she had killed her immune system, and she can't go outside of her home. These people's lives were tragically changed by Roundup. Now, before I got involved in cases like this, I always thought the EPA just conducted their own experiments. And to hear the comments from the Bayer representative and others, you would think that. That's not what happened. I was shocked to learn that the EPA allows the manufacturers to fund the experiments and the studies, and those studies are very susceptible to bias from the industry. The EPA really only knows what the industry tells them. There are studies that go back to the 80s that indicate that glyphosate is associated with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. There were many other studies that came out in the 90s and 2000s. And what the manufacturers do when that happens is they ghostwrite articles that flood the scientific community. And when the EPA looks at these studies, they do what's called a weight of the evidence analysis. And because there are so many studies that the manufacturers have put out there, the weight of the evidence, according to the EPA, is that glyphosate was safe. But that label hasn't changed in a long time, and the science is catching up. And I heard that there were no regulatory bodies that had ever found glyphosate to be dangerous. Well, that's not true. The World Health Organization did that. In 2015, the World Health Organization found that it's a possible human carcinogen, but the warnings never changed. In 2022, the United States Court of Appeals found that the EPA's human health assessment related to glyphosate was flawed, and it was vacated because they didn't follow their own cancer guidelines. They have essentially said the EPA had to start over. In the proposed bill, it talks about the human health assessment that the EPA does. In this situation, when it's already been vacated, how is that going to work with this bill? In a sense, I think it does. Well, I heard a lot about how this doesn't affect lawsuits and doesn't affect liability for manufacturers, but I think it clearly does, and that's the purpose of the bill. The underlying claims are failure to warn claims. A company should tell its users and its consumers what it knows about the product. I don't think anybody's asking glyphosate or Roundup to be banned, simply for the manufacturers to tell the users what it knows about those products. We had 5 weeks of evidence in our trial, and a lot of that centered on the EPA and what the EPA might have known, what the EPA might have told people, There's a juror from this case here. I could obviously talk for hours about 5 weeks worth of evidence. I know you don't want to hear me do that, of course. But I think we have an interesting perspective from this juror who can tell you what she thought the evidence showed about the influence that the manufacturers like Bayer have on the regulatory process. There's an internal document that was put into evidence at trial that I found very interesting, and then I'll be quiet. But Monsanto and Bayer have done no studies on glyphosate or Roundup since 1991. And there's emails that talk about that. And they say they haven't done that because they're risky. There's a risk that those studies might not say what Monsanto wants them to say. They even hired a scientist who was a famous scientist back in the 90s that nobody here is going to recognize his name. But he looked at other studies, independent studies. And Bayer hired him so he could go testify in front of the EPA and help them. He told them, I'm not going to help you. Those studies don't help Bayer. You know what they did? They made him sign a secrecy agreement so he couldn't tell the EPA what he thought. So with that, I'll conclude, and I ask you not to give foreign companies like Bayer and ChemChina immunity in the state of Missouri from personal injury and death lawsuits.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next, not in favor of Senate Bill 1416, please proceed.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Holtmeyer. I am a lifelong Missouri resident. I have lived in Jeff City for my entire adult life. I am a chemistry teacher, and I've spent the last 20 years teaching chemistry and biology right over here at Blair Oaks High School. I was chosen to sit on the jury for the trial back in the fall with Monsanto. And as mentioned, I spent 5 weeks learning a lot. I feel very privileged to have gotten to sit on that trial and learn about these people and this product. And the people that need to be warned are regular people. They're not farmers, they're not soybean farmers, they're not big groups of people. They're regular people. As I sat there and I listened and I heard about Valerie and I heard about Daniel and I heard about Jimmy, they're your neighbor. They're Jimmy that's right down the road in Eldon. They're people who use it on their own property, on their home property. They go to the store, they go to Lowe's, they go to Walmart, and they read the label. And if the label says use it, they use it, and they don't pay any more attention. And we keep hearing that the EPA approved the label that was on the glyphosate-containing Roundup. The other thing that we hear, and as a scientist, a thing that I sat there and listened, and I went in impartial. I did not know anything. I'm a little bit closed in my own world. But as I sat there and listened, I listened for evidence. I listened for Monsanto's people to say, we tested it and we saw that it was safe. And I never heard that. I heard 5 weeks of testimony from their PR people. I heard 5 weeks of testimony about other things. I heard about trials they didn't run because they didn't think it was necessary or they thought it was too risky. I didn't hear their scientist ever. So in 5 weeks of trials, they did not have a scientist come and say our product's safe. They didn't send those scientists to the EPA either. The EPA is a huge group. Much like here, they are required to hear from people and base their choices on what those people say. And they didn't send the information that was necessary. So they didn't send data that says we tested 70,000 people and they were all safe. They didn't send the pieces of data that said this is a carcinogen. And plenty of other people had scientific trials with valid evidence that pointed to glyphosate being a possible carcinogen. We heard that repeatedly. I don't know how they can say nobody's ever said it causes cancer, because it does. It was absolutely clear that glyphosate caused cancer. We heard that repeatedly. And we heard that Monsanto ignored that repeatedly. We heard that they only sent part of the information they got, or they didn't run the trials. They didn't run a trial since 91. Our science has improved. Like you, of course, since the 80s, the science has improved. And cancers are slow growing. Things like lymphoma are a slow growing cancer. You're not going to see it next year. The people that I heard used the product years and years and years ago, which just makes me wonder, what about all the people that have used it in the last 5 years? Are they going to be protected 10 years from now when their cancer comes up? How can you... Sorry, I have a lot to say. I'm trying to keep it short. The information that the EPA got was not complete. They got a majority of their evidence from Monsanto, who obviously had something to protect. They flooded the EPA with their own version of the information and hoped that nobody would notice that it wasn't sound science. It wasn't clean, easy to read science. As a science teacher who looks at that easy, clean science all the time, it was obvious that they did not share the information they needed to, so the EPA didn't get a chance to see what they needed to. So the label, I'm sure the EPA did the best they could, but the label didn't say what Monsanto knew. Monsanto knew that their chemical was unsafe, and they chose not to share it. And now they don't want anybody else to get to talk about it. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, not in favor of Senate Bill 1416, please come forward. How many people are here left to testify not in favor?
Just sit down.
Got 3 more, so you can come up and sit at one of the chairs if you'd like to. Please proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. Still morning. My name is Amy Gunn, and I'm the current president of the Missouri Association of Trial Attorneys, and I'm here in opposition to Senate Bill 1416. You've heard a lot about Roundup, and I want to speak a little bit about paraquat. That is also a herbicide that is on the market. It is currently manufactured by a China state-owned company called Chem China. This bill, if approved and signed into law, gives immunity to China for the products that it is making that American citizens, your constituents, are using and being harmed by. Syngenta is a corporation that originally manufactured paraquat. It started in the 60s, and in 2017, Chem China, state-owned chemical company for China, bought Syngenta and now produces paraquat, which is still being sold in the United States, but has been banned by 58 countries, including China, for its neurotoxic and toxic effects on its users. It does have restricted use. It is only used, you have to be licensed to have it, so we're talking about our farmers and our growers who are using this product, paraquat. And Syngenta, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, similar to what we've heard about Monsanto, did its own studies with respect to the toxic effects of paraquat, including neurotoxic effects, and found the extraordinarily high correlation between the levels of paraquat and Parkinson's disease. So Parkinson's disease is a neurologic disorder that affects motor and non-motor functions. I'm sure you all have probably know someone, or Michael J. Fox, Muhammad Ali. These are neurologic conditions that are linked to environmental toxins, including paraquat. So this is something that Syngenta knew in the 80s, that Chem China knows now, that science has shown a correlation between this product and harm to its consumers. And Senate Bill 1416 makes a judgment call, decides that it is more important to immunize manufacturers of products that cause cancer and cause neurologic disorders such as Parkinson's disease, rather than choose to protect constituents and citizens of this state. It makes it would be different. It'd be the first state in the country to give immunity to manufacturers of products such as this, I think you have to ask yourself, where does that end? Is there any end to companies manufacturing bad products and being sued for their bad products from coming in and asking for immunity? Anything in this job, which I appreciate you all very much for doing this job, has to be weighed. The risks and benefits, the rights and the wrongs of it. And I've heard a lot of testimony about there's plenty of ways to sue based on, no, there's not. The causes of action that have gone forward on these products are failure to warn. Having a label that merely says this product can cause cancer does not take this product off the market. It certainly would not, this is not calling for the reaction I find a little bit hysterical, frankly, with respect to we're not going to have our products anymore, growers are going to stop growing. I think what this clearly is another example of corporate favoritism, whether it's just Monsanto or if it's Syngenta or Chem China. I guess we don't know for certain. But Senator Bean, I've heard you express some concern about China this morning. And my read of this bill would, if for example, the hysteria ensues and there's no more Roundup for Missouri, can't get it anymore, you're concerned about it coming from China. This bill immunizes China. This bill, as it reads, would immunize whatever products come into this country and this state that might be found to cause cancer, neurologic conditions, what have you. There's absolutely no remedy for those folks, your constituents. And I think those are things that we have to consider. So with that, I oppose this bill and I'm available to answer any questions anyone may have.
Any questions for the witness? Senator Carter?
So I got in here a little late. I apologize. So you do have concerns that this labeling, this language here would change liability?
Yes, it's very clear, paragraph 10, on page 5 of the bill, the part in bold, at least my part has bold. Right. If you read it, I'll tell you, I find it kind of hard to read, like there's a word missing. But basically what it says is if you register this product with the EPA, which all of these have to be registered, and you have a label, and if you read it generously, you have to have both those things. But if you have a product that you register and you have a label that's been approved by the EPA, or forget being approved by the EPA, or if you have a label that's consistent with, quote, the most recent human health assessment performed under FIFRA, which I think we heard 1991 was the last time anybody looked at Roundup, or consistent with the United States EPA carcinogenicity classification of the pesticide. I'll be honest, I don't even know what that means. Shall be sufficient. So in language like this, as you all know, there's a big difference between may and shall. Shall is complete, may is maybe. Shall be sufficient to satisfy any requirement for a warning label regarding health or safety or any other provision of current law. And that's what a failure to warn claim is the label on the product sufficient to warn the consumer of the dangers? And so this is immunity from failure to warn claims. You can have failure to warn claims under a product liability cause of action or a negligent cause of action. So don't be confused that there's still negligence available, because it's not. Failure to warn is the basis for all of these claims, has been and will be, and this is immunity from those claims. Voting for this says, you know what, any company, now or in the future, that registers a pesticide and that has a label under one of these three categories will not be able to be sued in this state by the constituents and the citizens of this state. So that's the judgment call that you have to decide. Which side are you on?
I appreciate the answer.
Any further questions? Just for the record, I'm a proud farmer.
Yes, sir.
I want to provide the safest food supply that I possibly can.
Yes, sir.
And you know how I do that? I provide you with food because I buy some of the best products. I want to make sure that, you know, you do get that safe product. So that's where I have my concerns.
And I appreciate you for that.
Thank you for your testimony. Please proceed.
Hello, everyone. Melissa Vatterat with Missouri Coalition for the Environment. Introducing myself properly with this bill this time.
Thank you.
Yes. MCE's mission is to educate, organize, and advocate in defense of Missouri's people and their environment. So I know sometimes ag and the environment can seem like they're at odds in this capital, and, but I'm really here for the health perspective. And Senator Carter, I realized when you were asking about the label, it was confusing and some people couldn't answer it. I can't do it any better than what was just said. The point is the labels that can be on it now, if they're there, then anybody who uses the product and gets sick in 20 years can't file a lawsuit against the manufacturer. This is about the manufacturer of the product. So I'm not going to, she did great. I have a lot of that in my written testimony, but I'm going to hit a couple of things. The point about the labeling, it's about the label that would already be on the product. And the point is that it helps the consumer be informed and make a choice. So the idea of like, oh, we're going to run out of the product or something. No, it's just maybe someone isn't going to purchase it. They're going to buy something else. And that's going to happen whether it's American made or Chinese made or any other country, right? Like if it's with this language, because it's about regardless of where the company is from. If they've gotten a label to sell in this country, then it would be sufficient to warn the consumer. I think the average consumer needs like really explicit language sometimes. So I feel for those who might get sick later. And the last thing I want to really say, because I know a lot's been said, a couple of things. There have been other chemicals that were once approved as safe and then later weren't, like DDT, Agent Orange. And then I know that there's so many people are very passionate about glyphosate. It does a lot for farmers. I understand that. So it's really not about farming here. It's about health. We know that there's a chance, and it has for a lot of people, glyphosate has harmed people. And I just want to use one example. Smoking. Some people die early because they started smoking. Or they're like my uncle who chain smoked every day of his life and died at 93 last year. Like the chances of the impact might vary from person to person who uses the product, but it's still possible. And we have lawsuits that show it and studies that show it that people can get sick from this product. And so let's make sure that Missourians can continue to have the right to say, I used that product, I was harmed, I need to be compensated. And the point is, there was discussion about how there are other ways that lawsuits can happen. This failure to warn, like I said earlier, is the predominant way that people bring the lawsuit. So let's not take that away from people who end up getting sick decades later. Let's see. I think that's all I will say on that. Thank you so much for your time.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
And I am dropping Sierra Club's testimony because they went to another hearing.
All right, thank you. Next, not in favor of Senate Bill 1416. You can just drag the mic over there.
Thank you. Hello, members of the committee. My name is Jay Devanini. I'm a third-year medical student at the University of Missouri-Columbia. I'm also the co-founder of Medical Students for a Sustainable Future at Mizzou, which is an organization dedicated to sustainability and health advocacy. I'm speaking on behalf of our chapter of Medical Students for a Sustainable Future, as well as the national organization, Medical Students for a Sustainable Future. And I'm speaking in opposition to Senate Bill 1416. So, our main concerns with this bill are really that there are inherent medical concerns with many different pesticides, and particularly with glyphosate, that we have based on the evidence that we've seen. And any product that has medical concerns really requires a duty to warn on the part of the manufacturer of that product. So in the medical field, anytime we do any kind of medical procedure, we are required to explain to the patient every single possible risk of that procedure, and we are required to ensure that they have expressed understanding of those risks. And that's what protects us if they choose to sue us later, because we can say that we explained those risks and that risk occurred, but we warned them that that risk occurred. That's kind of what's lacking if this bill is passed. So just to explain our concerns scientifically with glyphosate and with what this bill would do. A lot has been said about the EPA saying that glyphosate is non-carcinogenic, but I think the previous testimony in opposition has expressed why we have concerns about the process through which those decisions were made. And the International Agency of Research on Cancer, IARC, which is the cancer research arm, essentially, of the World Health Organization, has classified glyphosates as a probable human carcinogen. And there are some studies that have suggested that glyphosate weed killers increase the risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma by as much as 41%. So why is there this discrepancy? I think a lot has been said about why there is this discrepancy within the EPA's view versus other organizations, but suffice it to say that the evidence is still evolving, but there is enough real-world evidence out there of people who have gotten non-Hodgkin lymphoma who have had significant exposures to glyphosate that we are concerned that that is a potential real harmful effect of this product. So with that said, I think it's essential that that potential consumers of this product are fairly warned of that possible risk. I'm not saying it's a definite risk. I'm not saying we know for sure that that would happen. But it's essential for people to understand that these are things that we've seen in the real world. And this law would essentially shield these companies that manufacture these products from being able to be sued by people without having to create any kind of warning label that expresses those concerns. So that's all I really have to say on that issue. I guess the last thing I'll say is that there are tens of thousands of lawsuits. I understand that we are a litigious society, but when you have tens of thousands of lawsuits against manufacturers of a single product, not all of those are frivolous lawsuits. These come from real people who have really suffered real health effects from these products. And so I would urge you to bear that in mind when voting on this bill. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for the witness? Thank you for your testimony. Next up, not in favor of Senate Bill 1416? Seeing none, anybody here for informational purposes only? Seeing none, once again, I did present this bill on behalf of Senator Justin Brown, who cannot be here today. So this will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 1416. No further business come before the committee. I would move that we adjourn. Do I have a second? All those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.